Today, it's my great pleasure to be speaking to Steve Hackett. So, Steve, thanks for taking the time out. You're playing La Mirada Theatre on Monday night. How is it to tour with the Genesis material again after so long?
Well, yeah, it's been a very interesting time. We were on board this cruise ship, the Poesia, with Yes and with a whole bunch of other bands, including John Wetton's reformed version of UK and Carl Palmer's band. And that's just a fraction of them. I mean, masses of stuff going on. It's unbelievable. Half the music business is at sea these days. But it was great. It was wonderful. Extraordinarily strange and thrilling at the same time because, the weather keeps changing. The boat is pitching and tossing.
Yeah.
Guitars and keyboards start skittering about the various stages. And it's all just part of it. It's all just part of the show. But it was a lot of fun. So it's been wonderful. We've played 2 full shows so far,
right.
And really looking forward to doing a third with in front of the crowd at La Mirada.
Yes, which I believe is a sellout.
It is a sellout, yeah, which is great, and it's wonderful to be doing the Genesis catalog again. From my version of, the 70s version of Genesis, which involved Peter Gabriel, and then latterly Phil Collins for 2 albums when we were a 4-piece, both Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering. And it's absolutely wonderful playing this stuff again in front of audiences that have just been going nuts for it. And it's produced sellout shows all over the place. And I don't know whether your listeners are familiar with what's going on in London, but if I mention the Royal Albert Hall, we're doing a show there because our Hammersmith show sold out. So the first tour basically sold out, and we stuck in a second British tour.
That's excellent, and I wanted to congratulate you. 2012 was a very good year for you. The first prog rock awards in the UK. Genesis got a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Your Squawk It project, Life in a Day, received an Anthem Award, and then the Prog Rocks campaign. Genesis Revisited won the best album, and you were voted top guitarist. That must be very gratifying for you.
I know, yes. It's very weird. You think all of those accolades so late in the day, but often these things are just a collection of things, like a kind of summation of what you've done so far. So, but I must say, over recent years, I've gotten busier and busier. So it seems my past catches up with me, with my present and future. So I've just been very busy in recent years working with all manner of people in all sorts of genres of music, not always in the progressive area. Mm-hmm. And, very happy to do that. Friends from jazz, friends from classical, very open to collaborations.
Uh-huh. And before embarking on the Genesis Revisited 2 project, what was the incentive for doing the second one? And was it a conscious effort to be very true to the originals? Because the first one was more reinterpretations and
yes, it was. Yes, I think this one was closer to. Well, I think in spirit they were obviously both very close to Genesis material. It wasn't as if I was going away and doing an orchestral suite, loosely based on the work of Genesis. It was actually the songs reinterpreted. But the difference, I think, with Genesis 2 is that we had a far larger cast in terms of guest musicians, guest singers, about 35 people on the album, if you count everybody, and the various engineering staff, which are very much, part and parcel of the whole thing, and they all bring their creativity to it. Mm-hmm. What I wanted to do was to let people know that if I was going to be touring this material, I would stay faithful to the original versions, but that we would enlarge it. Yeah. And a bit like taking an old photograph, and if you could bring it into focus again, shall we say, and almost like, dusting something off and giving it an orchestra, giving it a new veneer, perhaps.
And
enlargements, really.
And that's what I like about this album. There are tracks there which all Genesis fans will really, really like and have listened to hundreds of times. But this new album, it brings them back to life. Obviously, at the time when you recorded them, looking back in hindsight, you were limited with the instrumentation, the recording processes that you had at hand. With technology now, all the instrumentation is much sharper. Everything seems more clear in the sounds.
Yes.
And the whole, song sounds more dynamic. So I remember,
I think they do.
Yeah, hearing something like Supper's Ready, on state-of-the-art recording equipment blasting up it was a great feeling, I must admit.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's less grainy. I think the separation is better. The production is better. Obviously I've had a lot of time to think about it, and technology's moved on a lot.
Yes. And how easy was it to pick up some of those tracks again after, some of those songs you haven't played in over maybe 30 years? How easy was it to get back into that?
Well, we had to research the parts. We did a computer sketch, which we then filled in with human beings. That's how we did it. In order to teach people the parts, we had to have a reference.
Yeah.
So, whereas at one time you would have had all those musicians in a room together negotiating their parts, when you've got a band made up of that many guest musicians, most of those people chose to work in their home facilities or in their own studios, including both of the drummers.
Yeah.
So you have to take a view that you cannot be hands-on with every single part of the process. We let all the singers function at home, send us what they were happy with, and they realized they were up against the early work of Gabriel and Collins, and some of them said it's a hard act to follow. I said, yeah, but you've got these guys have got great voices, and so they were able to more than live up to it, I think. I thought safety in numbers, because if somebody doesn't like the sound of one of the singers, then we've got other singers.
Yeah.
One after the other. For instance, Nad Sylvan, who's with us live, singing the first track, Chamber of 32 Doors, sounded wonderful and kind of soulful and a little bit black. And Michael Ackerfeld again, who kicks off Supper's Ready, got a wonderful, rich, dark voice. And Francis Dunnery, who's also on that. And then, of course, we had Simon Collins, Phil Collins' son, who's a fabulous singer and drummer in his own right. And he and I have worked together before on some stuff of his. So, and it goes on, Nick Kershaw, Conrad Keeley from Trail of Dead, who's more well-known over here, not so well-known in Europe. Neil Morse, of course, who's well-known for his work with all things, including Transatlantic. I'd have guested with occasionally myself, just breezing in for a solo. It's very easy. So it's a tremendous amount of camaraderie that went on with this, and collating all those performances at home was a real joy, because every one of them turned in a star performance.
Were there any musicians or singers that you would have liked to have used but you weren't able to use or couldn't use? Or did you pretty much get everybody that you wanted?
I think we pretty much got everyone we wanted to do on this. There are one or two people, I cast a net very wide over the whole of the music business, and I think we basically got 99% of the people who were approached, and the wonderful thing was that they said they grew up listening to this material.
Yeah,
and it wasn't an issue for them in terms of negotiating. They were just happy to do it for the crack. So I said, doing this on a favors basis, and obviously I'm going to owe you big time, all you guys, after this. So I'm happily repaying favors to many of the people who've taken part in this.
I recently interviewed Francis Dunnery, and he was gushing with praise, for, first of all, for the fact that he was able to work on the album. He's been a lifelong fan of yours, and also for the for you returning the favour and playing at his charity award. And I could see he was over the moon about that.
Well, he's a fabulous singer, player, lovely guy, phenomenally talented, very driven.
Yeah,
and it was lovely to work with him. And he's one of two people with the It Bites connection. These days, our bass player live,
Lee Pomeroy,
who's handling both bass and 12-string duties, is also involved with It Bites. But I think it was in a different era after Francis left.
Yeah.
But great connections with people right across the board here.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you knew if any of the members of Genesis had heard the album or had any feedback about that.
No, I haven't had any feedback so far from the Genesis guys. But obviously the fact that it's done so well, and the fact that it was in the charts.
Yeah, I'm sure they've checked it out.
In England, it went straight into the charts and was outselling huge acts.
Yeah.
We were outselling Coldplay at one point with this, and so they obviously they'll be aware of that, and I would imagine they'll be sort of chuffed and miffed in equal measure. I think chuffed that they wrote the stuff with me at that time, because there's no point trying to argue with your past. And maybe miffed that they hadn't thought of it themselves. But I've always said that I would rejoin them if the band ever wanted to reconvene with me. But frankly, I got tired of waiting.
Yeah.
It's phenomenally difficult to try and negotiate anything with Genesis. I think what happens is you have a bunch of young guys together who manage to swing with the punches with each other and all pitch in, and then they become world leaders.
Yes,
it becomes very difficult to negotiate with them and their entourage. And you think, hang on a minute, we started out playing the Dog and Duck. It was very easy. You phoned up. You want to do the Dog and Duck on Friday night? Yeah, fine, okay. I'll bring my guitar. That's how the biz starts out. But we spoke about reformations, but it's unlikely to really ever come off. Phil is officially retired now, but I'm getting busier and busier. So some guys in the business feel they're just starting out, like John Wetton, for instance.
Yeah,
he and I have conversations. He says to me, "I'm busier than ever now. I'm working in UK. I'm working in Asia. I'm doing this. I'm doing my solo stuff," And I said, well, I just feel that, we're just starting out, John, aren't we, really? He said, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's in it for the long haul. We all are. We all realize that the clock is ticking, but there's just such, I think, loyalty and respect and love from fans that we are very keen to cater to.
And there's been a resurgence and a new lease of life for progressive rock music. People are rediscovering it and checking things out. Younger people that maybe weren't around listening to it in the first place.
Well, yeah, I think so. That not only is there a market for it, and the press seem to be much more forgiving than they once were. Certainly, the British press, the tone of it tended to, lay charges at our feet in terms of excess and too wordy, too classical, too jazzy, too thin, too big, too fat, too long. Almost as if there was a predisposition to sort of knock it off its perch, as it were. But if you take the genre at its best, it's all embracing. It embraces every other genre. It's music without limits. A song can be 20 minutes long or 2 minutes long. It doesn't matter. It can involve comedy, dynamics. You can use an orchestra. You can use a three-piece. You can just sit down and play an acoustic guitar. It's everything, including the Venezuelan nose float, really.
Yes.
There's no prejudice. So I think, music without prejudice, you can't really argue with that. It's music full of surprise, and I think that's what's kept it alive.
Well, were you aware in the early Genesis days that you were breaking new ground? It was very experimental at the time.
I do remember in 1973 when we were playing the Roxy in LA for 3 nights. We were unable to get a gig anywhere else in America, and John Lennon said he liked selling them by the pound. You'd think that would have made a difference about us being able to get a gig, but no. So we had this one residency where we did 2 shows a night. But I remember that crowd absolutely loved it. And I think it was the same 500 people that came to all 6 shows. But that was actually wonderful, and I felt that we were almost like performing in someone's living room. A tiny place, but everything seemed to function. The band were definitely on top of their game at that time, and I felt I was playing guitar in the world's best band at that point. I was that proud of it then, and I'm that proud of it now. I still think that it was a world force.
And from a technology point of view, say the equipment you were using there, the guitars, the effects, was that pretty limited compared to what you're doing today? Or does today's technology mean you need a lot less equipment with you on the road when you travel?
Well, I think there was a certain level of sophistication once I was working with an Echoplex, so we had echo on the sound, so it's starting to sound produced live. I think that was a big thing, and for distortion, I just used a couple of little boxes at that time. But then I don't want to get too technical and bore people, but an octave divider, which meant that the guitar could sound a bit like a cello at one moment and a bit like a voice at the next, and I think guitars and synths were trying to outrun each other. And I think something about the Genesis sound, we tried to make guitars sound like keyboards and keyboards sound like guitars, so we were definitely out to confuse each other.
Okay. I'd just like to end with a few quick questions. Any fulfilled ambitions? Anyone you'd like to work with that you haven't yet worked with?
Well, there've been, a long time ambition to work with. There's a guy from Azerbaijan who's a wonderful tar player called Malik Mansurov. He and I have spoken about working together. We've done some stuff together with a Hungarian band called Jarbi. But he's such a wonderful player on the instrument. It's a little bit like discovering the equivalent of the next Ravi Shankar. I'm absolutely in love with the way he plays, and the instrument that he plays is a tiny little instrument called the tar, related to the guitar family, the sitar family. It's absolutely gorgeous, and of course I'm quite sure that someone far more famous than me will get there first, and if justice is served, he'll be on the next Hollywood soundtrack that's got any kind of exotica to do with it whatsoever. So he's brilliant. And I don't think I'm sticking my neck out to say that I think he's going to become a huge star.
Right.
It's almost like the John McLaughlin of the instrument, not just fast, but magical the way he plays. Wonderful.
And what would your fantasy rock group be if you could have any singer, bassist, keyboard player, drummer, and all-star lineup? Who would you have in your band?
Well, that's a difficult one, isn't it? I always there are so many people that whose playing I absolutely loved. I was a huge fan of Paul Butterfield, his harmonica playing, and I was lucky enough to see Mike Bloomfield when they were obviously both alive in 1966, and Elvin Bishop, and I thought they were just wonderful. So And I knew that they jammed with Hendrix, after hours, but no one ever bothered to record the thing.
Shame.
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those things. So any combination of those guys would just be wonderful as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. So with, modern recording techniques, has the technology actually changed the way you write, or do you still write in the same way that you used to, or you always have?
Well, I think technology does change the way that you write, but I tend to work these days on paper a tremendous amount, because I think that, the best instrument is the brain, and you don't necessarily have to have an instrument in your hands when you're writing something. Mm-hmm. Riffs pop along at all sorts of unlikely times, so pen and paper, those old twin bastions, I use that quite a bit. Of course, I work with computer, and everyone does, and I tend not to use amps when I record these days. I just go straight into the box with my pedals, and it makes a wonderful noise. But for live, I like to use my Marshalls. Yeah. I've got my Marshall cabinets. I've got my Marshall T-shirt. I've got a little bag that's got Marshall on it that I keep my little things in. And so I'm a bit of a Marshall man. Yeah. Ideally, of course, a Marshall and a Les Paul. Yeah. But I use Fernandez guitars live. It's very much the same shape. But it's got the sustainer facility and the tremolo arm. So.
Yeah. So when you're not playing guitar and you're not touring, what do you do to unwind and relax?
Now that's a good question, isn't it? Relaxation. There hasn't been too much of that recently.
I was just going to say, do you know what that is?
I do like to read.
Yeah.
And if I can get some exercise on a free day, wander out, that's good. But I find the older I get, the busier and busier I get. So it gets tougher.
That's always a good sign, though. So what's next in line after the Genesis Revisited tour? Do you have anything in the pipeline?
Well, the plan is we're doing a European tour after these dates. We're doing La Mirada, and then we're over the border to do Mexicali near San Diego, and then we're back to Europe. We kick off with a show in Paris. So we do some European dates. Then we do the British stuff, the UK, and then I've got a bit of a lull before the next bunch of things kicks in. So a few festivals, of course. I'll get some recording in, because I don't like to sit around twiddling my thumbs very much. I'm very much a believer in getting the most out of spare time. So playing and working, it's the best thing for me. I can't sit there and twitch on a beach. I can't do that anymore.
And you've, throughout your career, you've made albums covering all sorts of genres of music. You've not just stuck yourself in one area. Is there any area that you'd like to go into that you haven't yet gone into, or one particular era? I mean, you've covered classical, jazz, rock, blues.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say I've probably hit most genres as we know it, but I think the mixture of genres is the thing that really fires up people, I think.
Yeah.
As I said before, the element of surprise is all important.
Yeah.
Both to be able to surprise an audience, but more specifically, more relevantly, yourself. So, it's great to be able to come out of the woods with all guns blazing. Yeah. Wonderful. That sort of musical ambush factor. Oh, I didn't think we'd end up here. Oh my God, what's happened here? Oh, suddenly the guitar's turned into an orchestra. What's going on? Oh, it's gone psychedelic. But next minute it's gone a bit jazzy. Yeah, but I don't like that very much. And then suddenly the ride, pitches and tosses and turns, and you're back on something that's perhaps, closer ground, and more familiar, I'm trying to say. So I love music that just keeps surprising you, but but hopefully coming up with great melodies and exciting playing.
Okay, well, Steve, that's been a pleasure talking to you. I wish
too,
you
Dave.
every success, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday evening. And
thank you very much. I look forward to it as well.
Great. Have a great gig.
All the best.
Thanks very much.
All the best. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.